What's up, guys? Sunday morning instant overreaction pod after a huge 31-6 win over Kentucky. And breaking news, Shane Beamer possibly getting a new contract now that he has to pay state taxes in 2 states since he owns Kentucky and Mark Stoops. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I am your host, Chris Marler. It is fantastic to have you along. It's a fantastic Sunday. It is a great morning after a win on Saturday against Kentucky. Huge win as well. We're going to get into it and all that and more. Right off the bat, let me just clarify something. Shane Beamer is not getting a new contract. That was just a bad joke. So before anyone gets mad in the comments, just know, just a very, very bad dad joke. Regardless, I'm happy you're here. I appreciate you guys making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everyday. Remember, we are a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Locked On Gamecocks is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends at 5 Hour Energy. Remember to go to 5hourenergy.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. All right, let's get into it. And this is like, I think all of us were hoping this would be the theme of today's episode, because last week we sat here on Sunday, the morning after the ODU game, and I was just like in a state of disbelief after what we saw in the home opener, in the season opener. And I think that the performance on the field, and I think it was fair because it was a bad performance in a lot of different areas. I think it really impacted the mood, the confidence, all that kind of stuff of only Gamecock fans. Because as you saw yesterday, there was no impact or effect or lack of confidence from anyone on that team, anyone on the coaching staff, and definitely not Shane Beamer. South Carolina goes into Lexington and absolutely dominates Kentucky. It's the third straight win in this series for South Carolina. Shane Beamer owns Mark Stoops, flat out owns Mark Stoops. I mean, what happened yesterday, and he talked about it in his post-game press conference. I think a lot of us probably before the season, maybe you would have said that. It still would have felt like maybe a pipe dream, right? Like to go up there and dominate in that fashion, like everything they had to do. We brought up on the shows all week long, like, hey, here's the 3 keys to winning. And it's scoring first. We talked about winning the turnover margin. I told you all that Carolina has led the SEC in turnovers gained over the last 3 seasons. Kentucky quarterbacks have led the SEC in interceptions thrown. All these different, stats and numbers and key matchups that they had to win if they had a chance of winning against Kentucky. They hit all of them. They won every single one of them and absolutely dominated. This team won by 25 points. Despite only having 252 yards of total offense. There's still things to work on. But the theme of this Sunday's episode, in comparison to last Sunday's episode, where it was just doom and gloom and sad and blah, 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 everything's gray, the sun is shining, right? It is a glorious day after. And you talk about just the difference in mindset after that win last night versus the win a week ago, and now what it means moving forward, because now you have a chance to get into the month of October and finish the month of September 3-1 or 4-0. And by the way, after that win, it was also announced that South Carolina's going to be hosting College Gameday next week before the LSU game for the first time in 10 years. Just a huge, huge win that felt like they just kept winning even after the game ended. So let's get into the game itself and talk about it. Out of the gates, wasn't super, super impressed with LaNorris Sellers and was a little bit concerned. And I think that's fair to say, because they got out to an early start. They scored. They were up 7-0. That was one of the main things that we talked about going into the game was if you can score first, you have a much better chance of beating Kentucky. Kentucky, like, first off, that's what South Carolina's done the past 2 seasons in a row. They beat Kentucky, is score first. And in games when Kentucky scores first, I think like Mark Stoops is like 9-2 in the last 3 years when they score first. He's 3-10 in his last 13 games where they don't score first. So Kentucky is just not built, for whatever reason, not built to come from behind in situations like that. So you have to put pressure on them early. And they did. Now, after they scored in the first quarter, Carolina did look a little bit I don't know, inept at times, just kind of like disjointed on offense. And they kept letting Kentucky hang around and kept letting them hang around. And you look up at one point in Sellers, there was an interception at the end of the first half that was just an inexcusable pick. And I was just getting very, very concerned that I was like, please don't let this slip away in the second half. Please don't let this slip away in the second half. Because I didn't think that the defense could have done any more than what they had done in the first half. They were so good. They got after Brock Vandagriff all day long. I mean, like, first off, Dylan Stewart is already a star. It's 2 games in. I don't know if you guys saw the video on Twitter yesterday where Kentucky at one point had 3 people like trying to help block him. He got through all of them. Kennard, I mean, Sanders, all of them. That defensive line, through 2 games, they've had 5 sacks in each game. Through 2 games, they have been arguably the best front 4 and defensive line in the entire SEC. It was incredible to watch all day long. I don't think there's a single person in the country, including Carolina fans, that would have gone into this game and said, yeah, I feel like we have the advantage at quarterback between Sellers and Brock Vandagriff, especially after watching Sellers in the first game of the season. Vandagriff's stat line yesterday, he was 3 of 10 for 30 yards, 1 interception, and I think he ended the day with 1 total yard of offense because of all the sacks. 1 total yard of offense. They harassed him all day long. And I think that was the most impressive part, because Sellers looked like he was a little bit tight early on and like a little bit nervous still, but the defense was just flying around all game long. And then finally, like this is what we were hoping you were going to see, especially if Sellers kind of struggled early, which is like, let the defense carry you and use the other talent you have around you on this team, until you get your feet wet, until you get things going. And Sellers was like, at one point in the third quarter, I remember tweeting this out, and I said, South Carolina is now 0 of 6 on third down. And Sellers was awful on third downs in the first part of the ODU game. He was really bad in the first part of this game. And as soon as I hit send on that tweet, the very next play, you had a 32-yard completion, and I think they scored on a 20-something yard touchdown right for that. From that moment on, and you got Sellers' confidence and his whole demeanor, and obviously how the offense worked as well, complete 180. And Carolina never looked back. And I tell you, I think that's something you really wanted to see after watching him struggle, especially with his confidence, the mental side of it in the first game. But the thing that stood out to me the most was, we talk about all the time in national media about how great of a coach Mark Stoops is. Sure, he only averages like seven wins a season, but he does it at Kentucky. It is the weirdest built-in, just because he doesn't win a ton, or just because the place he's at, he gets an excuse for not winning more. I don't understand that. We talk all the time about how great of a coach Mark Stoops is. He has been absolutely outclassed, outcoached, outworked, all of it. Not only by Shane Beamer, but by the entire staff. Clayton White, for the 4th year in a row, held Kentucky to under 16 total points. He held them yesterday to under 200 yards of offense. It was the lowest total yards allowed since 2021 Eastern Illinois, and they did it against Kentucky with all those receivers and a former 5-star quarterback. And it was from start to finish, it was a masterclass in what Beamer has done several times, which is when he is seemingly the biggest underdog, right? And when everyone is counting him out, including some of his own fans, including me on here. I did not think they were going to win that game going into it. What does he do? Proves everyone wrong. Just very nonchalantly, and then lets you know about it afterwards and tells you how, all week the media had some very lazy narratives. And I don't disagree. It was such a perplexing first game. I didn't know what to make of it. I think a lot of people didn't. But I mean, you look back at that game yesterday, and again, struggling early on offense. Late in I believe it was midway through the third quarter, you go for it on 4th and 1, or you line up to go for it on 4th and 1. And Beamer talked about it in his post-game presser. You're just trying to get Kentucky to jump. All you have to do is not jump. And at that point, Kentucky really hadn't allowed, outside of the first drive where Carolina scored, they hadn't allowed hardly any kind of offense output. There was, after the first touchdown drive for South Carolina, they had 27 plays for 52 total yards. They were averaging less than 2 yards per play. It was awful. And then he tries to get him to draw, like to jump off sides, and they do. And it ends up leading to the score. And you get back-to-back touchdown drives in the third quarter, and then they never look back. And then that's when it got real fun. That's when it got real fun because it was very obvious very quickly. Oh, Kentucky actually is a team that's not built to come back from this offensively. It's like, yeah, sure, South Carolina's had its woes, and they looked bad at times, even in the first half of this game, all game against ODU, whatever. But Kentucky was completely overmatched in this game. Completely overmatched in this game. I mean, they fell apart. Like, they fell apart, and it was because of, like, what Carolina did to them. They picked their points of when they were going to attack. They were, like, patient as much as possible, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But that defense, we said going into the year, had the potential to be a top 5 defense in the league. And I think a lot of people outside of Columbia thought that was crazy or stupid or both. And it's very evident that this is one of the best defenses in the SEC. They are just so relentless at getting after, like, fundamentally sound for one, very opportunistic, and just absolutely relentless at getting to the quarterback with four people up front, not with exotic blitzes, not with, like, anything crazy like that. We got 4 people, you got 5, try and block them. Can't do it. It was so impressive to watch yesterday. And again, like, listen, Clayton White was a guy that had a lot of offseason, I don't want to say slander, but some question marks of whether he should have even been brought back going into year 4. Shows what we know. I mean, just incredible job by him and this defense again. There's so many other takeaways to have from this. I want to hear what y'all have to say. A lot of it was mainly just trash talk that I saw on Twitter, which well-deserved. We had, like, I would say probably 60% of the comments we had all week in the YouTube comment sections, like, going into this game, were all Kentucky fans talking trash. All of them. Got real quiet in Lexington. That place was empty, like halfway through the third quarter. So just a tremendous Saturday. Can't stop smiling about it. It was so much fun to watch. We will get into even more about the game, break stuff down. I'm sure that I'm forgetting some things that also happened. It was a weird day because, like, ESPN had all these games going on at the same time at noon, so they wouldn't cut to South Carolina. So by the time it cut over to the game on my TV over here in Atlanta, they were already up 7-0. So I was like, I missed the entire offense. Anyway, we'll get to all of it. Before we do, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends one more time at 5 Hour Energy. I told you guys about this before. If you have a to-do list to tackle, if you want to go to the gym, if you're just trying to get through that 2:30 or 3 p.m. kind of lull in the day, grab a 5 Hour Energy. They are super convenient and portable. There's no sugar. It is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore: watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone, okay? Also on the site, you can build your own 12 or 24 pack, which is pretty cool. Choose whatever flavors you want. It'll be delivered right to your door. Make sure you go to 5hourenergy.com. That is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, when we come back, we will continue just basking in the glow of that win yesterday against Kentucky, 31-6. 31-6. We'll talk more about it when we come back. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, let's get back into it and just going over, man, some of the things that really stood out to me the most and impressed me most. I pulled up an article from A Sea of Blue. It's a Kentucky fan website or blog or whatever. Of course, Kentucky fans who had zero doubts that they were going to win this game, just collectively as a whole. And of course, now it is being described here as one of the worst 5 losses in the Mark Stoops era. That's how bad it was, right? And here's the thing. I think that's a little bit dramatic and kind of like discounts what Carolina was able to do. But it does highlight some of the things that were just so incredibly one-sided from the standpoint of what South Carolina did well and what Shane Beamer and his staff did well in comparison. Like there's been multiple times throughout the first 2 weeks of the season that everything could have fallen apart against ODU. And I think you had the 4th and 3, you're about to go for it, and then you have a false start from Josiah Thompson. It ends up being 4th and 8. You end up having to punt. At any point, they could have folded up shop and gone home and just, assumed what everyone thought was going to happen anyway and lose that game. At any point during like the lull through like most of the midway through the first quarter and past halftime, where you had those 27 plays and 52 total yards, I think I'm looking at the drive chart right now, and it was after the touchdown, it was punt, field goal, interception, end of half, punt. Like, and you're on the road. And again, you're on the road. And in the Shane Beamer era, you're only 2-10 in road games against SEC teams. 2-10. One of the wins is in Lexington. But like at any point, because it wasn't even just like all the outside noise and like the doubters or whatever. You went through a ton of adversity in each of the first 2 games. And then it felt like the floodgates opened. And not only did you start hitting your stride and having success, but then you watched a team that's supposed to be so well coached and well disciplined under Mark Stoops and all that kind of stuff absolutely fall apart in front of you. Like again, at one point they're highlighting the what this pass rush was able to accomplish, especially with the numbers that they were sending after the quarterback. At one point, like I told you, like you put 3 people on Dylan Stewart, he still was able to get through. There were multiple plays where they had at least a tight end or a running back in to help out with protection, and South Carolina had 3 or 4 total people blitzing or getting to the quarterback against 7 people trying to create a pocket for Brock Vandegrift. They still allowed pressure almost every single drop back. It was so bad that at one point during the game, Kentucky ran the ball on 18 straight plays. 18 straight plays. And when they asked Stoops about it afterwards, it wasn't because it was by design. It's because they could not protect or have enough time to drop back and throw a pass. That's how effective the pass rush was. The other side of it was, I said this going into the week, you had to win the turnover battle or like the self-inflicted wounds battle. And what I mean by that mainly is like you cannot get yourself in a bunch of pre-snap penalties in general. If anybody watched the Arkansas game against Oklahoma State, that's a perfect example of, like Arkansas had every chance to win that game and routinely kept getting in their own way with bad penalties late. Kentucky fell apart in the third quarter of this game. They had 1 penalty in the first half. They finished the game with 11. They had 1 in the first half. During one drive, they had a penalty on 4 straight plays and had 40 yards of offense wiped away because of penalties. I mean, absolutely falling apart in front of you. And they're at home. They're at home against a team they were almost a double-digit favorite against. Just incredibly impressed with that. The way they finished out, and I think this is the analogy I feel like makes the most sense with this defense. The way it has played so far is it's this like blood in the water and sharks in a pool type situation where the moment that defense smelled blood, and you saw with Debo played with his hair on fire every game, but like especially on Saturday. That secondary, the moment that they felt like they could start taking like, a little bit more chances, maybe jumping on routes or whatever. I mean, even Worry just perfectly baited. I think it was Vandegrift that threw the pick. Maybe it was the backup because at that point they'd already pulled him. But I mean, taking advantage of like once they're sitting there and like you have your foot on their throat, right? If you put your foot on someone's throat, you don't let up. That's one thing Kirby's always done. It's one thing Saban's always done. I've never really considered Beamer to have like a killer instinct because he's such a nice guy. This defense especially absolutely has a killer instinct. And it was just so damn impressive to watch all day yesterday. All right, getting some of the numbers and what else played out. The 3 points that we said going into the game that were going to be most important, scoring first, they did. Winning the turnover battle, they did. And then the last one was, what was the last one? Oh, yeah, the defense, like obviously holding them to under 300 yards. They held them to under 200. And then under 20 points because this is a much different team when they don't score over 21 points. Like when they're held to 21 points or less in the last 5 years, Kentucky is 3-20. Now they're 3-21. And if it's under 17 points, which is what Carolina's done every single year that Beamer's been there, they are 1-17. That's a shell of what they are outside of that. And this is also, let's be very clear. Kentucky's a team that gets a lot of credit because they've had a couple of boom seasons over the last 5 years. Like they got to double-digit wins. But for the most part, like they're bowl eligible every year because of how bad their non-conference schedule is. They don't have to play Clemson every single year, right? They don't have one of the toughest schedules in the country every year because of how soft their non-conference is. This is another reason why I think that South Carolina was so ready to go and obviously so much better and well prepared. Is the fact that they played them this early in the season. Usually the first couple weeks, Kentucky does not play anyone. They don't play anyone with a soul. Usually an FCS team, some directional school out of Kentucky or Ohio. They got a home game week 2 as the first conference game played all season long in the SEC. And I think it spoke volumes about how prepared this team was mentally, obviously also physically, and then schematically, it just felt like there's no stone left unturned. They had a plan for everything that was going to happen. Ashford came in the game, right? Like I remember I was texting one of my friends as a South Carolina fan at one point during like the first half, and they were, as like with a lot of people, I'm sure, like we're wondering and out loud, like, is it time to bring in Ashford? Is it time to pull in Sellers? And then Sellers, got banged up and had to go to the locker room. So yeah, I was wondering, like, is this where you're going to see a switch made, because it did feel like a pivotal moment that it might need to happen. And I think the injury kind of forced their hand a little bit. It also it speaks a ton to the confidence this coaching staff has in Sellers, because like we've seen him struggle for 6 quarters now before the second half of this game, and he is their guy. Make no mistake about it. It's great that Ashford was able to come in, and it's also great that he's able to be such a selfless team player in that role. Because like it's just very, very clear that like Sellers is the guy, and he will be the guy all season going forward. So let's see here. One of the other things that jumped out, we have these are just the stats. I brought up the third down. What do you call it? Third down defense for Carolina against Kentucky specifically over the last 2 years. They held them to like 11 of 28 on third and fourth downs over the last 2 seasons. It's like right around, I believe, let me do the math here. Like 30-something percent. They had to be better than on third down. 3 of 14. 3 of 16 overall if you include fourth downs. 44 yards passing total. You held them to under 3 yards per play, rushing and passing. 2.6 yards per pass. 2.6. South Carolina had over 10 yards per pass, only 166 yards through the air. Sellers, not crazy numbers. I think he finished like 11 of 15. I'll pull it up real quick. 11 of 15 for 159 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a pretty bad pick and some questionable throws early, but when he settled in, he was great. And here's the other part too. I kept saying, who is going to be the guy that finally gives him some help or gets this offense going? Like we brought up on the Friday episode, the receiver props, like in the totals that they had. I think Vandrevius Jacobs was like 22 yards. He ended up not recording I don't think he recorded a reception. Yeah. And then Jared Brown was like right at like 28. And I was like, that feels like somebody has to pop this weekend. Like, especially if you're going to win, you have to have at least one guy over 30 yards, right? Jared Brown had that in the first drive. He had 4 catches for 50 yards. Mazeo Bennett had 3 for 63 and a touchdown. Michael Smith got involved. Love to see that. Got involved early with some pretty big key catches. And you also think about this, like as dominant as South Carolina was, it still could have been worse. Sellers had multiple throws early on that were, I don't want to say they were in danger of being intercepted, but they were dangerous throws for sure. He also fumbled twice and luckily recovered both of them. They didn't lose either one of them, but still, this game could have been so much worse, and that's already with a 25-point win, holding them to 6 total points. The defense, again, 5 sacks on the day, and it's not just one guy. Like last week, you had out of the gate, you had Kyle Kennard and you had Dylan Stewart, both as the co-defensive players of the week in the entire conference. Stewart is a monster. Stewart is a monster already. We said in the preseason, what would a successful year one for him look like where he would make a big impact on this defense? And I think I said, you don't need him to have double-digit sacks. You don't need him to be Clowney. You don't need him to be Will Anderson or whatever else. Can he get 5? And can he get them in opportune moments? And the answer to that is clearly yes. Clearly yes. At one point, he had I'm trying to think of the exact number because Brad Crawford tweeted it out, but he had forced like 3 fumbles in like he forced a fumble in the first half of the game against Kentucky, and it was like the 3rd fumble force from him in 5 quarters, his first 5 quarters of playing college football. I like just you cannot ask for a better start out of that kid. Yeah, and then it's just a who's who of everyone else. Like Nick Evenwari and Debo Williams lead you in tackles. Everyone got in on it with sacks. TJ Sanders had one. Vicari Swain had one, which should have been intentional grounding. They didn't call it. All day long, they were putting pressure on Kentucky quarterbacks. It didn't matter who it was. And this was not like people kept calling this like bend but don't break defense after week 1. I did not see that. I don't think the offense gave them a lot of help, because they were never able to like break or bend really for most of that first game, but just a tremendous job. Now, what does it mean moving forward? I think there are a lot of positives to take away from this. I don't think it necessarily means you're going to have, you're not going to get like an 8-10 win season or whatever just because of this win. If last week taught us anything, it should be that maybe we just dial back the reactions and irrational outbursts, even from me, because from week to week, this league is very difficult to win in and be consistent and all that kind of stuff. So you gotta ride the waves of like the ebbs and flows and all that kind of stuff. And I think that Beamer understands that way more than I do or the fan base does or anything like that. But you have LSU coming to town this weekend. And I've said to you since the very first episode of this show that I've been hosting of, there may not be a better chance of the 4 games that you have just been listed as an automatic loss going into the year from outside media. LSU might be the one that you have the best chance at winning. Now we're going to break this game down a ton this week. And like as I've told you guys before, my main job is working with ESPN in Baton Rouge and all those guys. And so we have a lot of LSU insight. We'll get to know the team and all that kind of stuff and what to expect in that game. But I'll give you a spoiler alert right now as somebody that's had to watch them for my job over the first 2 weeks of the season. They're not that bad. Garrett Nussmeier's really good. But late in the first half yesterday against Nicholls State, it was a 2-point game. So let's go to a quick break and close out with a little bit of that. And then also like there's also one other thing that happened all day yesterday that I think is huge that Carolina avoided. And we'll get to that in the third part of the show. But before we do, I want to say one quick thing about our friends at Ibotta. We haven't talked about them in a minute, but you guys have heard me talk about them before. They are a fantastic company. It's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you spend. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. You can make sure that you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Now, Ibotta is different than most traditional credit cards or anything like that. It is actual cash back. It's cash that you get right away. It's not rewards. It's not points, whatever. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipts, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores and Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It is time you join the over 50 million people who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store on Google Play, or the App Store or Google Play, download the free app to start earning cash back using the code LOCKEDON. Now, that's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and the promo code is LOCKED ON. All right, when we return, we're going to close out the show with a few final thoughts and some more positive things, and really what this huge win in Lexington can mean moving forward. All right, we're closing out today's show. With a little brief look ahead, but I want to say one more thing that I thought was really great about yesterday. If you watched any other college football, it was a great day of football. Great from start to finish. Michigan got their ass beat, which was awesome. Texas looked really good up there. That Arkansas-Oklahoma State game was an incredible game to watch, but it was also a heartbreaker for Arkansas and Sam Pittman. The 3:30 games, you had South Carolina, obviously, and then Auburn got beat by Cal. At the same time that Auburn was getting upset by Cal as a double-digit favorite, Notre Dame, fresh off their win at A&M, a 28-point favorite against Northern Illinois. They lose straight up at home. There were upsets. Boise State took Oregon down to the wire, had a lead in the fourth quarter. There were upsets all day. I'm forgetting Bama struggled mightily with USF. I mean, like that game was not in hand at all until like maybe 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Like they looked very bad as well. My point is, a lot of teams struggled yesterday. A lot of teams got upset, like a lot. And South Carolina was an underdog, so it would have been more difficult for them to be upset. But you avoided all that. Like there's so many teams, I think, and fan bases that are going into Sunday today with a same attitude probably that we had last week. Like, what the hell just happened? Like, like we have so many more questions than I thought we did just from a week ago. And I think that's like being able to avoid that. Like, there's going to be times like, things don't go your way. I'm sure it happens every single season for every team. But being able to avoid that this early on, and like, especially after what they looked like against ODU, I think Shane Beamer needed this. I think the rest of, I think the fan base needed this, like maybe as much as him, just to feel, a little bit more confident. Like maybe, yeah, like we all were overreacting a week ago. And going into this next week, the level of confidence from each of these teams, I'm telling you right now, I think that they're a 9.5-point underdog against LSU. Game day is going to be there. The confidence in Vegas is very different than the confidence from LSU fans going into this game. I can tell you that. Like they might tell you like they think that they're going to, beat the blank out of South Carolina, but that's strictly because of the arrogance of the logo on their helmet and the success they've had nationally, over the last 20 years or so. It has nothing to do with this year's team. LSU is a winnable game. It's a winnable game. We'll talk all week about it, but you have a really, really big opportunity to go in to the end of this month. You have Akron after this. In this month, 3-1 before you get into that brutal stretch in October. So now getting to 6 wins doesn't seem as much of a uphill battle and insurmountable odds as before. So got to stay healthy. That's obviously huge. Would love to see Sellers continue to develop here. The other thing too that was so great about this yesterday is like you saw other people around him, not even just the receivers, pick him up when they needed it most. Rocket Sanders, he didn't have a great day on stat sheet. Like you're not gonna read the box score and be like, wow, he played out of his mind. But when they needed him and they needed something in the third quarter, it was him. Like at one point he had a long touchdown run that got called back because of a penalty, and then he finished off that drive with another touchdown run, and it just felt like, because for a moment there it almost felt like, oh man, here we go again. It's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and with this kid who had like such a great season 2 years ago, and all of a sudden now is just trying to like battle back from this horrific injury and whatnot, and he's kind of like a shell of himself at times in comparison to 2021. For him in that moment, I thought that was huge. There were so many great and I think pivotal things that happened that they're going to help the confidence of this team moving forward, where you're going to come back home to Williams-Brice. It's a noon kickoff, which sucks, which was a night game. But I think that also does help you in a sense with LSU, because that is a program that is not familiar with playing early games at all, and a fan base. They'll travel and they'll try to drink the town dry, I'm sure. But early games, I think the 12 o'clock start is actually more of a benefit for South Carolina than fans might think. So that is all for today's episode. We could talk about it for hours, but it was a huge, huge win. South Carolina starts at 2-0. They get game day for the first time in 10 years. A lot of positive things happening right now at the University of South Carolina, and we'll try to keep it rolling. So ever since I've been wearing this hat that you guys forced me into, things have changed. So I guess it's really on you. We have you to thank. So make sure you're tuning in all week. Check us out on social media at Locked On SC. Do me a favor. If you're on Twitter, follow Locked On SC. It's our handle there, and we post the shows and all that kind of stuff. But also, any questions, topics, like I said, like you guys want brought up and discussed, send them my way. We will make sure they make the show as well. And until tomorrow's episode, I hope you guys have a fantastic start to your week, and we'll talk to y'all then.